Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the State of Hoops podcast. This is your co-host, Todd Schlekeway, along with my fellow co-host, Nate Malchow. Nate, how are you doing today?
Schleck, doing great here in the start of February, and away we go. And we're getting closer to March Madness. So this is a fun time of the year. Teams are wrapping up, getting ready for some postseason action in the next few weeks. So it's been good. Looking forward to this to our guests in this podcast for a long time, Schleck.
Yeah, when we sat down for season one content, what did we want to cover for season one of the State of Hoops podcast? One of the topics that rose way to the top was, hey, we need to do an episode on the tradition of Northern State men's basketball, specifically paying tribute to Bob Olson in that era. So many special memories for Nate, you growing up in Aberdeen, me, my dad played at Northern, I played there for 2 years, and it was such a special era. And our two guests today really don't need an introduction when it comes to basketball in South Dakota. Their names are synonymous, but we're so thrilled to have Shane Warwick and Keith Moore join us to relive their memories and share their experiences with Coach Bob Olson and playing for the Northern State Wolves. Shane and Keith, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for having us. Looking forward to it.
So, Nate, what is growing up in Aberdeen? What was your first memory of a Northern State Wolves basketball game?
Well, my first memory, there's so many of them growing up, and if people who have been a part of that community and people in South Dakota, I think, know that basketball is a big fabric of the city of Aberdeen, and Northern State certainly is at the top of that list. So I grew up going to games in the Civic Arena. Probably remember around 84, 85 when Shane and Keith first started there, when they still played at the Civic Arena. I remember watching Bob Walks coach at that time, and just my dad at half times, we would go and he would sit up in the balcony and we had to cross on the baseline where the baseline bums and the Bud Man and all these guys were. And I just remember my dad looking at me and saying, "All right, hold my hand. We're going to walk across the crowd." And we're going to go to the concession stand and do that. So I was a 6 or 7 year old, just remembering that. And then also the move into the Barnett Center when Bob Olson, who we're going to talk about today, took the reins from Bob Walks after legendary Bob Walks retired. And it went from a legend to another legend in Bob Olson. And during that era, they were moving from the Civic Arena to the Barnett Center. So got to see that open. And watch this backcourt of Shane Warwick and Keith Moore play during that time. And they were also, Shane and Keith were also part of the Northern Players, put on a group called the Wolves Basketball Buddies. So I should have brought this picture, but I have a picture of myself as a little 7th grader, and I'm sitting by Warwick and Moore and the rest of the team. And you'd go to these clinics, and then you'd get in the games for free, and then you'd get, I think you got a Pizza Hut pizza for so many times that you got to go there. So just thrilled to have these two on today to talk about Coach Olson in particular and their experiences, because they certainly were role models for us growing up, Schleck, and guys that we looked up to, and even special through the years being able to keep that relationship with these guys too.
Yeah, I remember watching Keith when I was a grade schooler. His lineman team played my dad's Mobridge team in the last year of the 2-class system, the old State B, and Lyman won the 1985 State B. Shane had a great high school career at Castlewood. I guess my first question is, when did you start paying attention to Northern State when you were growing up, or was Northern on your radar growing up in high school? At what point did Northern become a school in that tradition that you paid attention to?
I got to start seeing Northern games probably when I was in 6th grade, and I had followed them. I went to a lot of basketball games from Castlewood to Aberdeen from 6th grade on up, but that was kind of during the Basenko era, and I got to watch all of that, and I was so intrigued going there. And I can remember a lot of times, going upstairs just trying to find a seat. I'd have to stand in the hallway, and I watched the game standing in the hallway because you couldn't get a seat in there, and that was just early on for me. That was always a dream, and never one that I thought would come true, because it was an unbelievable atmosphere. And as a small kid from Castlewood, it was that was made my week every week going to a game there.
Yeah, and my first memories, Todd and Nate, were Kevin King went from Lyman County to Northern. So in 1980, we won the state basketball tournament in Lyman County. Kevin King went to Northern, and I'd never been to college basketball games before, and he went. And I remember the first thing was I started listening to him on the radio. You could get, at night you could get the radio, AM radio, and you could catch the game if you had your radio just right, you could hear the games. So I listened to my first games at Northern when Kevin went out there. And then we got to go up to the first games. And I knew when I went to my first basketball game at Northern that this was a special place, and those were the Scott Basenko years. So Kevin was a youngster. Scott Basenko was an upperclassman. And Scott was just one of those guys who was mesmerizing player. I mean, he's, Eric, I say this, and I say this with all due respect to both guys. Eric Klein, I say, is the best scorer in school history at Northern State University. I think Scott Basenko, as an overall player, was the best player in Northern State history. I mean, the dude just knew the game of basketball up and down the line. Could make a move here, and no guy was going to go this way, and this guy was going to go that way, and he knew that guy was going to be open. And he was just a special player. And when you watched him play, it was just like, and then he's playing with one of your heroes from high school. That was really the difference maker for me with Northern, was like, man, this is cool. Then, Nate, you brought it up. You had the Bud Man, you had the Hams Bear, you had the old guy that directed the band, and they threw pennies down at him. And the Bud Man warmed up, with the team, and the Hams Bear guy was over there. It was a spectacle. I mean, it was something that you just went and, you were like, you felt like you were at an NBA game or something, it was so cool. So that was when I was just really like, this is a cool place. And of course, my hero, Kevin King's playing there. I was like, if I could ever play at Northern State, that's where I would want to play.
And you almost had to be there to experience that, guys. And I don't think there's a lot of old video out there. If somebody's got old video of some of these games, send them to Schleck and I. I mean, we would love to watch them, but just an experience. And when you go back there, I had the chance to go back there a couple days ago for a son's basketball game. The look in that arena is still the same. I mean, you can still smell the popcorn. I mean, it's just got just that unique feel to it. And then to put a basketball event in there with all those talented players, you guys, you bring up Scott Basenko, you say his name back in Aberdeen now, and people just light up still. And just how good of an all-around player he was. 6'4" point guard, which was kind of unheard of back then, who could shoot, who had vision. He could do it all. And he's an absolute legend of the Hub City in that facility.
Yeah. If you remember, and quickly, he would spin the ball on his finger. He could kiss it off the glass, make the layup. He could throw the ball up behind his back, bring it back between his legs, shoot a reverse layup. I mean, those were the first things that I saw. I was just going, it was like Shane said earlier, it's like, I'd like to play here, but I don't know if I could ever play. He was one of those guys.
Those were some good horse shots that he was doing in warm-ups and doing that.
There's not many boys have said that, I've got to remember seeing players play from the 70s on. And, after college, he got beat out for the last spot by Rolando Blackman in the NBA, who was an NBA All-Star. He wins 10 to 12 amateur tournaments when they were really talented, staying there at Brown Trucking at Aberdeen. He goes to Brookings for 1 year, who doesn't even have an amateur team, puts one together, wins it, and then wins another 5 or 6 or 7 in Sioux Falls for shenanigans. There's not another player in the history of South Dakota that could do that. So for me personally, he's the best player that's ever played.
I can remember my dad talking often about Scott Basenko. I never had an opportunity to watch him, but just a legendary player. Let's talk, Shane and Keith. You obviously had opportunities during the recruiting process when you were at Castlewood and Lyman. Talk about your recruiting process and what led you to Northern. I know you both had different paths that led you there. So that's the first part of the question. And then at what point did you get acquainted with Bob Olson?
Yeah, so I can start. When I was in high school, about the senior year playing, he started to recruit me. Back then, you had to be on the phone. You either sent notes or you had to be on the phone to talk. And I've said about Coach Olson, he was the best recruiter. I mean, he was the best recruiter. I ended up going to SDSU first. Gene Zolk had recruited me there. Gene and Bob were the two best recruiters that had talked to me. I mean, and it was a tough decision on what I would do. I went to SDSU, but Gene Zolk left right a month before school started. And I went anyway, and then ended up going to Northern and then redshirting and playing for Coach Olson. But as a recruiter, that it was second to none. I mean, he could just talk. He could tell you stories. He made you feel like you were the best player that he was recruiting. And it was all genuine. It wasn't like he was telling you stories. You could tell that he really believed like you were going to make a difference at North State University if you came up and did what you needed to do and put the time in. I always remember that one of the last things he said to me was, I was getting down to the end and we knew we had to make a decision in the next week or so. And he says to me, if you tell me you're coming to Northern State, I'll use my left hand because he'd use his left hand. If you tell me you're coming to Northern State University, Keith, I'm taking the day off tomorrow and I'm going fishing. I want you. I'll always remember that story of him telling me that, how hard it was to tell him, that I was going to go to SDSU and play at SDSU. But just an awesome guy, awesome recruiter.
Yeah. So I visited Northern, and Bob Walks was still the coach when I was there. And like Keith mentioned earlier, that's where I always wanted to go. My recruiting days were still back in the days with Yankton and Dakota Wesleyan and Dakota State. And I ended up going to Dakota State my freshman year. And the only reason I honestly went there is because I could tell you all the rosters up and down at Northern State, and I didn't think I could play there. And, after a year at Dakota State, it's just still, that was just heavy on my heart that's where I wanted to go. I was passionate about going, and I went up there and redshirted. So that would have been, my redshirt year would have been Bob Walks last year. And Coach Olson was still the head women's coach in finishing. But during that redshirt year, I was able to practice every day. I played noon basketball. I played city league. I played amateur tournaments on weekends. And I went and played with college. So I was playing basketball about 5 days a week, all during my redshirt year. So just being around Northern, and then when Coach Olson had got the job, naturally there was some familiarity with him being there. And like I said, the passion that Coach Olson had was second to none. And he was genuine and it is somebody that you really wanted to play for.
Thank you for sharing kind of your journey that got you to Aberdeen. We're going to transition now to 2 sponsor ads. The South Dakota High School Basketball Hall of Fame. Love South Dakota hoops? Discover the legacy at the South Dakota High School Basketball Hall of Fame, a nonprofit dedicated to preserving our state's rich basketball history for generations to come. Visit their incredible exhibits at the Sanford, Pentagon, and Sioux Falls, and explore stories, milestones, and legends online at www.sdhof.com. From iconic players and coaches to unforgettable teams, this is South Dakota basketball.
And if you're looking for high-quality custom gear, look no further than Park Bench Apparel, your South Dakota-owned print shop. Park Bench Apparel specializes in screen printing, embroidery, laser and UV printing, plus unique giftware for every occasion. Outfitting your company or team, they have you covered with fully customizable team stores and corporate apparel. Find Park Bench Apparel at South Dakota High School Activities Association events and follow the action on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Park Bench Apparel, wear an adventure.
And you're listening to the State of Hoops podcast. Special guests, Shane Warwick and Keith Moore. All right, Shane and Keith, you're now on campus, and I know you were teammates for several years, but Shane was there first. But share some of your initial thoughts on what was it like playing for Bob Olson, coaching philosophy, practice, games, any stories you may have to share.
I'll start it out. Just like, there was never a time that I didn't want to go to practice. And like I said, I was probably just loved basketball and loved to play. And there was never a time that coach never came in without juice and ready to practice and compete. He was never down. It was just, everything was on all the time. One thing I think that if you really cut to the chase of Coach Olson, that he loved you, that he knew he cared about you, he knew about winning. So there was never ever, he could get on you all day long, and there was never in question that he wanted what's best for you, what he wanted best for the team, and that he cared. So I just felt like that was a constant all the way through.
Yeah, Todd and Nate, I remember Coach always saying to us at the time, he wasn't married to Sherry yet, so he was single, and he would always say to us, I don't have a family. You guys are my family. I remember him always saying, it's like, you guys are my sons. And that's how it felt. It was just a real family type atmosphere. And as Shane said, he was never down. He was never unprepared. I mean, he always had a practice plan. It was always folded. It was in his waistband, and you could tell, that he was ready to go. This is what he wanted to do. You knew he loved it. I mean, he lived it, he breathed it, he loved it. You just did everything you would expect to have in a program that ended up as a phenomenal program under his leadership. You watched tape, practice was detailed, you drilled shell defense until you were so sick of shell defense that you you didn't want to do shell defense again. You were so sick of running through the walk shuffle that we ran still at the time. But I mean, he wanted everything when it came game time that we knew what we were doing, how it was going to work. He didn't want bad shots. He didn't want bad possessions. He didn't want defensive breakdowns. You know, he wanted us, if we were going to get beat, you were going to beat because the ball just didn't go in the hole that night, but it wasn't going to be because we weren't prepared to play a basketball game. That's how he led. And it was just so fun. You know, when you're a basketball, you know, like all of us, when you get to the point where you play college basketball, and it's what you want to do. You want to coach like him. Yeah. He was that coach.
Yeah.
Now, when you guys practiced, when you first came on campus and the games were at the arena, practices were at Dakota Hall, correct? On the Northern State campus? Okay.
Tile floor, Nate. Yeah. Tile floor.
A tile floor, yep, in both places. There wasn't any wood floors then, but just you guys would practice at Dakota Hall. Did you get any practice time at the Civic Arena prior to your games too? Was that arranged? I've always wondered how that worked for you.
We did a little bit, but it honestly wasn't very often. We had some before our first game. We always had the alumni game there, and every now and then. But it was far and few between where there was nothing regularly scheduled there.
No, I remember it was a big deal if we had practice there. It was a big deal that we were getting to go to the Civic Arena and have practice. And I bet we're going to talk about the Civic Arena, but that's another place that was just special and second to none. A place to play basketball.
No question.
One question I have, because he was still wearing it when I was there, Shane and Keith, did he wear that maroon and gold sweatsuit? And you two can confirm this, because you know how stories get passed down. And by the time I was there, late 90s era, the legend had it that he got that as a hand-me-down from Bob Wachs, but he wore that every single day for practice. Just, you want to comment on that?
He had that he wore all the time, but I know for sure that a maroon, you know, the old coaching shorts that had the snap, and they also came in long pants. He had that on a lot of time, and I know for a fact the white shirt that had a sweat stain, that was Bob Wachs's. So it was one of the two. When Keith said he had his practice plans tucked in, it was either in those maroon ones, long or short, and then a lot of times he had the sweatsuit, and that was constant. So you never wondered who was coming.
One thing that I've heard with and Schleck, you played for Ole in the mid-90s too. So you always talked about when you went on the road and you had pregame meals and all that stuff. I mean, just let's get inside the routines here a little bit. You're talking about the practice gear and all of that you or that Ole wore. Did you guys have like any like when you get on the road, where you would go, what you would have for a pregame routine, anything like that stuck out through your years with Ole?
Yeah, well, first of all, you talk practice gear. Let's talk about the red shorts.
Yes.
That were John Stockton style, right? They were John Stockton style. And you throw it all in a net bag and, you know, get a little thing that tied it all together, and he turned it in.
Terry would wash it. Terry would wash it.
Terry, you know, and but it was quite the practice gear that we had.
Is it till junior year? We had, you know, the gray Northern T-shirts with the red shorts. I don't think we got the reversible tops until my junior or senior year was the first time that Northern had actually a reversible practice top. Otherwise, it was the gray T-shirt.
Yeah, or skins and gray.
Yep.
You were skins and gray T-shirt.
Okay.
That's true until we were older. And then, of course, you talk about going on the road, Nate. We still had the rear-wheel drive vans, you know, so we had the 15-passenger vans. There were no buses back then. And I remember I always thought, now I tell my kids, I don't know how in the world guys like you, Nate, that your size, those dudes rode in the vans, you know? Yeah. Yeah, I'm like, you get those vans today, it's like guys that are 6'9" sitting in those vans, you know. It's like,
good luck.
Yeah, we still drove the vans, you know, when we came home. You'd come home from the Bemidji Duluth trip.
Yeah.
1:30, like, I can't drive anymore. And we would drive.
Yeah.
Get behind the wheel here for a while in this rear-wheel drive 15-passenger van in the middle of winter and get us the rest of the way home. But then I also remember the meals, Nate talked about. You had limited dollars. So I remember the times after a game or before game, Ole would say, all right, I'm going in. It was like you had parents back in the day when we'd go to a restaurant and your parents would say to you, I'm going to order. You're not ordering. I'll pick off the menu. You know, you'll eat what we order. He would say, we're going in. You can get half a sandwich and a bowl of soup. And that's what that's the money we had. You didn't get to order yourself. It was just like, okay, we're getting half a sandwich and you get a bowl of soup. And I remember Sarge Grimes, guy from Zachary, Louisiana, had come up here to play, and he couldn't live by that rule. Sarge was always like, I can't live on half a sandwich and a bowl of soup. But so many good stories. You ended up in the hotels that weren't motels, that weren't the nicest places. But, and I'll say again, we were always prepared. Ole always had us prepared, but the road trips were pretty special.
Yeah.
You guys know, living in the locker room, living in the hotel, living in the 15-passenger van. Those are the fun things, right? That you remember from the days when you played and the guys that you played with, the fun stories.
Yeah, those are the bonds that you keep. And I had to bring that story up because I've heard from numerous players who played for Ole about the half sandwich and a bowl of soup. And
it's a true story.
Yeah, and that's happened through the years. And Schleck will tell you too. I think these players have told me that his rationale for it was a hungry player is a great basketball player, and there's some truth to that as well too. And just being prepared, being focused, and keeping that part of the routine.
Yeah.
It was a true story, and Shane and Keith, it never changed from your era to the 2 years I was there. And it's no fun to get a half a sandwich and a small bowl of soup when you're redshirting and you have no chance to play and you're starving. So there was a black market among us red shirts where we would bring other food along, and we kind of had it figured out at the end.
Yeah, you had to do that. Well, and you could say this too. I forgot about this. You'd get the sack lunches when you hit the road.
Yes.
You remember that? You'd get a box of, there'd be a sandwich, some chips, and a cookie.
In the cafeteria.
From the cafeteria that we would eat on the road on the way.
Oh.
So one thing that always stood out to me about Northern State and, especially Ole's tenure is the number of South Dakota players that made impacts there. And it is, I think, why still today, and we'll talk about this later, Keith, you were just up there for I Hate Winter. It's why they've had the best fan support for years and years. Northern State has. And, Dakota players gravitated towards Northern. And talk about some of your teammates and your team specifically when you two played together, how your teams fared, some of your memories of the teams you played on.
Yeah, I'll start. This is a special, I feel like, story, Todd, Nate, on Coach Olson. So when I got to Northern, Coach Walks had just finished up and Ole had just taken over. So it was Ole's first year when I got there. And we weren't very good. My freshman, sophomore year, we weren't very good. Ole was rebuilding the program. And I remember into my third year, you were hearing rumblings about, well, maybe Coach Olson wasn't ready for this. Maybe Coach Olson, this was too big a step for him at this time. Or those were the things that we were starting to hear as players. And of course, we love the guy. You love the guy and you want to do all you can. I remember that bothered us in the program because you love the guy. And so it was fun. My junior year is kind of when, for us, we really turned the corner. It was our first games, the first teams at 20 wins. And, then my senior year, we were able to make it for the first time to the national tournament. But I look back at that time, Todd, it's a special time to have been there when Coach Olson was just starting. He was taking it over. He was making it his own program. And then to watch his trajectory of what just kept going up. The success that he had all the way to the end of his career. You look back at that and go, it was a special time to get to be a part of what he built from the beginning and to go through those years that were struggle years. And I'm sure he'd say the same. And we would all tell the stories like we all do in our lives, the stories that are meaningful, the stories where we went through some tough stuff and you had to battle to get through it. And we did that with him at that time. And I've had the chance to talk to him about that, what a special bond that creates, when you're able to be a part of a program like that. But you also touch on the South Dakota connection and the guys that played there. I mean, we had all kinds of, guys that were there with us, South Dakota guys that played together from, you had Mike Peets and Jay Kusler and the Kusler boys before us and Scott Basenko and Randy Heemstra, Kevin King, and the guys that played with us as well. Just so many local South Dakota guys that were there before us, with us, and after us. Really does make it a special place. I mean, a story from just last night being at I Hate Winter. I told you guys I'd get emotional at least once in this thing. I went bathroom and I came out. My wife was waiting for me, Christy, and I walked out. And this isn't about me. This is about the Aberdeen community and what it is. This guy was waiting for me outside the bathroom. And he says to me, "Are you Keith Moore?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm Keith Moore." He says, "I watched you play." So it's been 36, whatever years. He said, "I watched you play." And I want to thank you for the time and effort you put in, and what a joy you brought to our community being committed to basketball the way you were. And I did what I do it now. I got emotional, and I told the guy, it's just such a special place. I just told the guy, it's easy to do that at a place like Northern because the community just loves the basketball. And if you just put it on the line for them, if you put in that time and effort, if you put out a good product, if you dive on the floor, if you play with passion, if you give of yourself to this basketball community at Northern State, but the community loves you. Win, lose, you can be 500, but if you've put it all on the line and you've worked your butt off, they have high respect, and they know what that means. They know what that means to have done that. And that's what I said to my wife last night. I said, that's just a story of what Northern State is and what Aberdeen is when a guy is, waiting outside of a bathroom 36 years later to ask if you are who you are and thank you for, what you did during your time you were there. It's just special people. I mean, it's what makes me so happy that I have 2 daughters playing there now, and I'm so excited that they've gotten a chance just to experience a piece of that community and the basketball piece that is Northern State University in Aberdeen.
I guess maybe add on to what Keith said, like he kind of nailed on the head starting out. It was tough at the beginning of coach's process, but in my junior year, we'd made some really good strides, and we had beat Mary in the playoffs, and then we had Western Montana that we beat, and then we had went to Huron, which was a huge rivalry between Northern State and Huron College at that time, when they had the great Fred Paulson was coaching at that time, and that was the triple overtime game. And some people have said the best college basketball game that they've ever been at. And I remember a referee said that had reffed all the Big Ten games, been all over the country reffing, and it was the best game that he'd ever been involved with. And I can remember how they all went down. I had a drop off to Jason Boyk, whose son is now playing with great players, playing at Southwest State, to get one. I had a pass to Jeff Turner right beyond half court that banked the 3 in at the buzzer. Sold out place on that. So in my junior year, we almost had got to the national tournament, and then Keith's teams did get to that. So we to be a part of that turnaround a little bit there was special. And then the following year, I had the opportunity to play the first year in the Barnett Center, and it was basically with a whole new group of guys. I was the lone senior on that team.
Yeah. I remember, I think we can tell this story too. I remember that Huron game. Back then, the Last Chance Bar would organize buses, that they would take to these games at DW or Huron or whoever. When we had these big rival games, the Last Chance Bar would organize the buses. You'd have caves on the buses. So these kids would show up, and those students would show up. We had great student turnout, and it would be wild. It would be wild. And I remember that game. We had and I think Mike could be fine with me saying this. Mike Cooper was from Sturgis.
He was our roommate.
And he was our roommate. And we're at the end of that game, just a fantastic game. We're probably down the last 2 or 3 minutes. And all of a sudden, he came out of the stands and stepped on the scorer's table. And the scorer's table snapped in half and broke. And the game stopped. They had to kick him out of the arena.
No.
But it was those days when it was just like a different, we live life a little differently, and things were allowed that, maybe today we obviously wouldn't do. But great stories from back then. It just, the buses, the Last Chance Bar organizing things, the students that showed up, and, just what a great atmosphere it created. But that was a great game.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot about that game, and especially that rivalry. Most everybody knows that Huron College is no longer going anymore, but the Northern State College NSU rivalry with Huron College was unreal. You would good luck getting in the Civic Arena unless you were there at the start of the women's game of a doubleheader right there to get into that one. But going back to what you guys are saying, and just to illustrate the point about those first couple years with Ole and just being able to build his brand and get the players that he wanted. For background for our listeners, Bob Wachs was the coach at Northern for probably 30 to 35 years and a legend. I don't think most people in Aberdeen had not seen another Northern coach outside of Coach Wachs, and he had so much success. He's writing books on the shuffle that Keith and Shane are talking about here. So to come in, to follow a legend, to build your own brand and your identity, I don't think people know how difficult that is, especially when you intertwine, Keith, what you're talking about with Aberdeen and just the basketball piece of the community where they understand the game and and they appreciate the hard work and the effort and just the locality of a lot of the players. In Coach Olson's legacy, that's one thing that sticks out to me, is that he had to come in, follow a legend, build his own brand, and it started with that special group with you guys and continued on into the 90s, and that is not easy to do. And just an awesome legacy for Ole building his own, putting his own mark on that tradition.
Yeah.
One thing that just makes me think about, not only did Bob love his players, but there is, to this day, there's never been a person that has loved Northern State more than him. He wasn't looking to advance. He didn't want another job. I remember him always saying, I think he was a GA at Mayville. And he says it was the worst 9 months of his life being outside Aberdeen in Northern State. So it was like when you knew that there was a little piece about everybody was pulling for Bob and loved Coach, but he loved Northern State and he loved Aberdeen. I've never seen a love for a university, a college, or a town like Bob had for Aberdeen, because it was unbelievable.
Yeah, those are my favorite stories, Nate and Todd. The one, if I had to pick one thing that I'll always remember about him saying to us several times every year, was that he'd get passionate, he'd get worked up about Northern and fired up about whatever it is, who we were playing, getting prayer, and he'd say, "If you cut me open right now, I bleed maroon and gold, not red."
I think we heard that more than we'd hear that 5-10 times a year. And he believed it, and we believed it. So
yeah.
And you guys played so hard. I mean, I just remember, the advice my dad gave me when we went to the games. He'd say, Nate, come out, watch these guys, and just watch how hard they play. 30, 40 years later, that's ringing true when I'm coaching my own teams. Kind of the holy grail of coaching is, how can you get your players to play hard all the time? And how can you get them to put forth that maximum effort and be dialed in? And this is so awesome hearing your guys' stories, because he built those relationships with you guys. You were prepared, but you were ready to run through a wall and play so hard. And this gives a lot of context to, what my own dad was telling me to watch with you guys, just to see how hard you competed and how hard you played out on the floor. And a lot of that was by design by Ole.
Yeah, I was going to say quickly, practice, Nate, that comes through. I mean, his practices were structured. One, we competed all the time. I mean, there wasn't any soft practice. There wasn't a walk-through practice. There wasn't, we got the chance to compete against each other all the time. And the expectation was, when you scrimmaged and you competed, you scrimmaged and you competed. It wasn't this half speed, we're going to go. And I remember whenever we would do the guys that you were scouting against, if it wasn't going hard and they weren't doing their job, it was not acceptable.
Right.
And I remember the one time that I got booted out of practice was because the scout team went so hard and the kid that was guarding me was so hard. I got mad, and I got mad at the kid, and we kind of got physical and shoved each other, and Ole, out of here, Keith, because the kid was doing what Coach wanted, which was, I want you guys to play harder against these guys than the guys that we're playing on Saturday night are going to play against them. And so the practices were really structured to be competitive. And we all love that. Yeah. I mean, it felt like you got the opportunity to really prove whether you could play or not, whether you're on the starting five or where you were. Just it kind of really kept you motivated, because you knew every day you showed up practice, you had a chance to compete for a spot, and that's what he wanted.
I also remember, even if you run it back further right away, I can remember when some of the, if you want to call it, the varsity practices were over, that he would stay. And, Northern, naturally at that time, there was a lot of players that were on the team, and the younger guys in bottom 10 or 12 would go and get to compete and scrimmage, and he was at the scrimmages. So not only what he said, and actually when you're older and you're starting doing those types of things, but when you're younger, he was getting people to compete from the top of the to the bottom of the roster, and he was there. He didn't have assistants go do it. He was there and coaching it. So it's like you knew you had an opportunity to move up and play.
Schleck will tell me all the time when I ask him about his experience playing there. And Schleck was on the 1998 Elite Eight team that beat South Dakota State. That's for a different episode, because we'll have a lot of stories to say about that. But Schleck will tell stories too about just how hard those practices were, and just competing and getting after each other. doing it in a fashion that, you're pushing each other to get better. But Schlek, you played a couple years for Ole. Maybe just elaborate on that a little bit as well.
I have a story similar to Keith's. Of course, I was there during the Ryan Miller era. Of course, who do I have to guard a lot of days in practice? Well, I have to guard Ryan Miller coming off of a Jeremy Vleam or Ross Pankratz or Dustin Umland screen. And one time I can remember I was redshirting, and Ryan and I dove for the ball, because you two know, Shane and Keith, because that's the way you played. If you didn't dive for a ball, you were going to hear it. And it didn't matter. The Barnett Center, they had that net down, but it would go on the tartan part of the floor, and you were there was no out of bounds in those shell drills, those live shell drills. And I can remember one time Ryan Miller and I were both diving for it. We kind of got into a little shoving match. And Ole, he made a point to make it in front of the team. He kind of got on Ryan, the star of the team, but he applauded the effort of both players. And so that was kind of my story. But I guess the best compliment I can give him is I never went into coaching for a profession, but Nate and I coached our kids as teens for years. And a lot of the practice drills that I came up with were some of the things we did going back to Northern. So that's what a legacy. And still telling stories like we are today. Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Give and go.
Well, we're gonna transition now to a give and go segment, Dane and Keith. You can't be a guest on the State of Hoops podcast without participating in our give and go segment. It's kind of our lightning round, and we're gonna start with. We'd like each of you to share a favorite Civic Arena memory from your time when you were playing at the Civic Arena.
I've got one. I'm still in high school, and I go to a playoff game, and it is Sioux Falls College, not USF. I believe that might have been during the Mick Holdland, but coming to Aberdeen outside the Civic Arena, and there is a line outside, down the block, and around the corner. So I'm wondering, for a playoff game, and it was an afternoon playoff game, so it's light out and you see it. So I'm thinking that is there a circus in town before the playoff game? Because the lines were so long going each direction of going into it. And that's always something I don't know why that always runs through my mind every time that not playing there was unbelievable. Watching games was there, but I'll never forget that sight, seeing that many people outside waiting to get into a playoff game in the spring.
Yeah. And I remember, I'll say my first games I remember going to, Todd and Nate, where Coach Walks was there. And I remember one time Coach Walks pulled the top of his sock off. He was so mad. I remember Coach Walks hitting the phone that was by him one time so hard that he rubbed his finger and broke his little finger. And I remember a time that they were playing so poorly, he walked down the sideline and across the baseline and got a hot dog at the concession stand and came back and ate the hot dog. Those are my 3 first stories when I was a kid. And they're true.
When the game was going on.
When the game was going on. I remember those 3 things from Coach Walks. And probably my most memorable at the Civic Arena was when I was a freshman and they had games on TV. So the KSFY did games on TV that year, maybe for 2 years. And I was a freshman. For some reason I was we're at the end of the game. Somebody must have been in foul trouble. Doug Smith or somebody must have been in foul trouble. But I remember Jeff Turner. We had Jim Griffin and we had Jeff Turner. And Jeff Turner was a phenomenal, just a great player, 6'4", could shoot it. And I'm just standing down on the block. And I'm standing, and of course they double, triple team Jeff. So who's wide open down on the block? And there's 3 seconds left. It's me, but I didn't think Jeff was going to pass it to me. I still thought he was going to take the shot. So I'm just kind of standing there waiting to see if the ball comes off. And all of a sudden, boom, he throws it to me. And I knew there was a second or 2 left. And I remember catching it. I was caught it in the air and I just turned and threw it up and it went off the glass and it went in. We went at the buzzer. I still look back at that and go, how in the world did that even happen? You just it was just bang, bang. I just saw Gunner's taking it. He's a senior. I'm a freshman. There's no way he's passing it to me. He passes it to me. You kiss it and you go to the other end. And then you had the baseline bums. And all those guys came off the baseline, hundreds of kids and just grabbed you. And it was that was my number one memory. Yeah.
I can remember that like it was yesterday. I can remember how Keith twisted and hit the shot. But Pierre Ducharme is coaching Southwest. It's sold out. There's not a seat on TV, all the other stuff. And I can remember Coach Olson running out with his left hand. onto that and just swinging and pumping, which you've all seen. And I can still remember that. I mean, like it was yesterday. So what a great memory.
Yeah, that's
And Southwest State then had all the Hamlin guys that they had 3 on the roster that I played against during that time too. So it was, that we all knew and played against. And so it was fun.
I remember watching that on TV from my living room. That was one of the few Northern games that we didn't go to. Shane, it must have been we pulled up and we saw the Lions like you're talking about, and we came back and we watched that on TV, and I just remember that celebration. Probably more impressive, or just as impressive as the shot, is that you survived all the baseline bums coming after you guys right there too.
Okay, so how about favorite Barnett Center memory?
so my senior year, I'll talk about 2 games that we lost, Todd and Nate, that were, I said last night, we had a little alumni, we had some guys come out before the game last night, all the basketball guys that were there, and we were all telling stories in the corner like this. And I said to the guys that I played with, I said the 2 toughest losses ever were my senior year. Duluth was really good back then. They had Jay Ginner. They had a couple, 2 or 3 guys that played in the NBA back then when we played.
And Jeffrey Brothers and Jay played.
Getting her, at the NBA. And they beat us at the buzzer in Aberdeen. And then Jay Gooser says, and Keith, you missed an in and out shot in Duluth that, we lost by 1 up there. But in that game at home, the place was packed. The place is rocking, the Barnett Center. I mean, it was just and we were on a run where it's just like, it felt like this is a special moment of time just during my time of getting to play, because we were just rolling. It was against Duluth. They were the best team. They'd been the best team, and we had them on the run. And Sarge Grimes, the guy I told you about earlier from Zachary, Louisiana, he's 6'4" black guy. I remember they would try to take his fat. They'd get the caliper to check your fat. They couldn't get anything on him. I mean, the dude was like, I think 0.5%.
World-class athlete.
Well, the juice is flowing, and I remember we outletted the ball to him, and he went down. And I mean, the dude was like, one of those David Thompson. He was like head at the rim, and he dunked it so hard the rim broke. And we were in the middle of this unbelievable. It just felt like we were ready to, take Duluth down. The game gets postponed for like 45 minutes while they fix the hoop. All the energy goes out. Our big run goes out. They end up beating us at the buzzer. That's my number one memory of that time. It was a special time, how hard it was rocking. Then the rim gets broke. We get beat at the buzzer.
I was at that game with my mom and dad, and I think you were there too, Nate. I can distinctly remember that.
Yep.
Because I just remember this big delay, and you're playing Jay Gittinger, who got drafted by the Cavaliers later. But I can remember that vividly because I was at that game as a young kid.
Oh, I was a 5th or 6th grader, and I was on the east side baseline. For some reason, was up probably about 20 rows on the side that Sarge dunked it, and that rim just went boom down. And I just remember you had the big delay. I think they might have had to go to one of the other schools in town to get another breakaway rim to get that replaced. But the announcer just kept playing music the whole time, and the crowd was just live and just. Oh man, it was loud in that place. And when you're a little kid, it's like watching the NBA guys and watching you guys. And that's how you guys were like our NBA guys watching those things.
If you remember back then, you didn't have the stanchions that, they had you were hooked on tables. So guys would dunk, and the backboard would, I remember times you'd go down the other way and you'd come back, it would still be swinging a little bit, the basket. But that, you didn't have the stanchion that held the hoops. And I remember when Sarge dunked that thing was just, the backboard was just rocking.
All right, last one in this segment. I'd like both of you, Shane and Keith, one word to describe Bob Olson. One word.
Passion. Love.
Yeah, I'm going to hyphenate it. Todd, I'm going to say father figure. For me, he was a real father figure.
That's awesome.
Like I said, I'll say this quickly behind that. He's like, I think the same with my dad. When I make decisions today and the things you do in your life, I think about what my dad, what would my dad think? And I do the same thing with Coach Olson. That's what I think when you're living your life and you're making decisions and you're raising kids and we're doing our lives that we're all doing right now. I think about the guy, about what he would think. And special guy. And that's how he was. You knew he disciplined you just like a dad did, and he loved you just like a dad would. And, great dude, great coach, but a father figure, no doubt.
That's tribute.
We're going to transition now to a few more sponsor ads. Charles Schwab, looking for trusted financial guidance close to home? Visit Charles Schwab's Sioux Falls, South Dakota branch, your local investment firm. Led by Lonnie Struckman and Zach Hansen, financial consultants with over 25 years of combined experience. Their team is here to help you reach your financial goals. Whether you're planning, investing, or just have questions, Lonnie, Zach, and their team put clients first every time. Call 605-231-4844 or search Schwab Sioux Falls at schwab.com to book your appointment today. Charles Schwab, own your tomorrow.
And for over 30 years, Pat and Pam Tiefenthaler of Tiefenthaler Real Estate with Hague Realtors have been trusted names in and around the Sioux Falls community. Building relationships that last, they're humbled and honored to serve buyers and sellers with care and expertise. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or navigating a move because life happens, Pat and Pam will walk beside you, guiding you every step of the way. Call Pat or Pam at Tiefenthaler Homes with Hague Realtors today, your trusted partners in Sioux Falls. Visit their website, tiefteam.hague.com.
I want to take a moment to thank the team at Insight. They're the folks who helped us with the visual assets to bring this podcast to life. And I can tell you, they don't just make things look good. They dive in, ask the right questions, and come back with great ideas that actually work. Whether it's branding, campaigns, or creative strategy, Insight has a way of helping businesses stand out and connect with people in meaningful ways. If you're looking for a partner to make an impact on your business, check them out at insightmarketingdesign.com. All right, Shane and Keith, now I want to get into the legacy of Bob Olson. We've had great stories shared today on this episode. Why does Coach Olson's influence still matter today to both of you?
I think the bottom line is just the love that he had for the guys that he recruited and played for him. I know guys that didn't play, some guys that, transferred and left, that still would always knew that coach cared about him. Nobody left that place during my time that if you transferred and you left, it wasn't like you were negative on coach and who he was as a man. So I think the big thing is he loved guys. And like I said earlier on the father figure, he loved that way. I mean, he disciplined us. I can tell you stories of the times that he had to say and do things, to me and for my good and benefit, to get you on the right path after a decision he made, that he knew wasn't the right one. And he'd discipline you, and yet you knew through that discipline that he cared about you as a man, that he wanted you to be better, that he wanted you when you left that university to be a better human being and a better man out in the world. And that just translates to me as love that I felt that he had for us during that time, and I still feel today. Tell you one more story. I went over there, Klein, probably 3 months ago, right at the beginning of the basketball season. Eric Klein and I went over to talk to Coach. He was sitting there with Sherry, and we walked over to, just to kind of smile with him, and he points at us, and he says to both of us, and because you can't understand him very well, he can say one word at a time now with his stroke, but he pointed at us and he goes, leaders, calling us, pointing us both saying leaders. And, both of us, I just got emotional, because it still felt like I was, at that moment, it was like I was playing for him, it was like I felt that sense of when I played for him, and he would just lift you up and he'd motivate you. And, he just had that sense of him. But I felt like I was, 20 years old again, and he was pointing at me, getting me fired up for a game, leaders, you're leaders. And Eric too, we both just started laughing. Of course, we said to him, we're leaders today because we had a leader and a mentor in you that helped us become, an understanding of what it took to be a leader in the world. It's the truth.
And I'd echo what Keith said too, and everybody has a different story, but I felt like it's somebody that didn't give up on me, that didn't have to give me the opportunity that he did, like maybe mentioned, earlier, different times, different days and stuff like that. But I don't think probably a lot of people would have stuck with me and stayed with me. So I mean, I felt like he did something for me that nobody else ever has. And I wasn't going to share that, but I shared that with you guys earlier, that just when he calls and tells you he loves you, it's emotional every time for me. And it's amazing to this day how he can make my day brighter when I hear from him, that he still touches you like that very, very few people can. So it's, I owe a lot to everything in my life to him.
Amen.
Shane, you told the that's so awesome. Shane, you told the story off before we push record, but I think it's important our audience to hear this. You know, you took Viber Curly to the state B boys basketball tournament last year, which is in Aberdeen at Walks Arena in the Barnett Center. Do you want to share the story about how you involved Oli in that?
I kind of what I've shared with that my passion and a lot of stuff that's all that I've ever really wanted to do in my life. And a lot of that was because of him. And I just asked him if he would come in and I wanted to share with my team last year and being at the Barnett Center, somebody that impacted me. And I just wanted to share that with my team that I was coaching, of the person that helped guide me, build me, and why what I'm doing today was because of him. And I just wanted to share it. And he came in and willfully did that. And when I think back at the state tournament, I just told you that's going to state tournament was unbelievable, and I love my kids and school and community and that, but it was that was a big piece for me personally of being able to introduce him to our team.
I'm just getting goosebumps thinking of that, guys. I mean, just you come full circle where you started the relationship, going into coaching, going into influencing the lives of youngsters, and being able to bring that person who was such a big influence on you. I mean, what we're hearing right here, and all of us have been involved in the game and everything, but what's a true essence of coaching, and what's a true essence of building young people, and mentoring them and being there for them. This is awesome.
And speaking of full circle, the reason this is such a cool introspective is both Shane and Keith have had or currently have kids in the program, and so this is a generational type story. And so I'd like you to talk just briefly about Shane Sky, who happens to be my sixth graders coach, which is awesome. Sky Warwick played at Northern, and Keith, you have Izzy and Lucy playing there now. What type of pride does that instill in you that you have kids donning that Wolves jersey? Do you want to get into that a little bit?
One of my happiest days is when that I did not want to influence Sky on his decision. He'd heard enough stories over the year, and just with the experience and opportunity to play at Northern for me. And when he had made that decision, that was, I loved it. And you think that playing college basketball was one of that was always my dream. And I kind of felt it was a dream, but going to watch your son or daughter play there, it was probably even a better experience. Some of the greatest years of my life.
Yeah, no doubt. I am so excited. Like I said, you guys, we just came from I Hate Winter this weekend. So we had I Hate Winter Friday, Saturday. And then you asked that kind of question, Todd. It was like I found myself sitting there, and we won 2 games. We beat USF by 1 on Friday night. The place is packed. The place is, for a women's game. I said, dude, you don't get crowds for women's basketball games like you get at Northern State University to watch women's basketball. And it was one of those weekends. We had a great crowd. We beat USF by 1, in-state rival. Come back the next night, play an NSIC rival in Southwest. And Southwest is, near the top of the division of the conference. And we beat them by 8. So 2 wins. My girls, get a chance to, Isabel had a great weekend just playing, had a great performance as well. So it's just like you sit there and you watch, and it's like Shane said, it feels, because you know what you experience and you understand it, it is better to watch your kids go through it, because you just kind of know the memories they're going to have of playing that they don't understand yet, of getting the opportunity to experience it. Almost feels better to you because the memories and the experience that they're getting now. It's so, and they're getting it. You're watching these people come up to them and give them hugs and tell them what a great job they did. And that it just doesn't happen anywhere else, where you have 25 or 30 people waiting to tell you, what a great job you did, and how important it is to them, just the pride that they have in Northern State University and the community. Just a real blessing, and really fun to be able to have your kids experience it.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those memories, Shane and Keith. And this is such a special episode for Nate and I, based on where we grew up and how part of the fabric Northern State men's basketball was to us, and to have you two join us, so very extra special. And one thing I think I would encourage the Aberdeen community to look at, and the Northern State administration, is we have naming rights on campus for Jim Kretschmann, very well deserved. Bob Locks, very well deserved. Don Meyer, very well deserved. I would like to see Northern, sooner rather than later, give Bob Olson naming rights, and probably Kurt Fredrickson too. Such a legacy up there, such a tradition. And that's something that Nate and I have talked a lot about. Is, boy, it'd be nice to get Ole's name somewhere in that arena, because of the impact that still lives on today.
Yeah.
We're in agreement.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I was thinking before the segment, Todd and Nate, that I said, if there is the one thing I want to get across is if there's a coaching Hall of Fame that Coach Olson isn't in, that he should be in, they should put him in quickly, because he deserves to be in every coaching Hall of Fame that would exist that he could be in. The dude, like I said, the guy was just, he's special. He's a special guy today, even not coaching, just being who he is today. And you mentioned Jim Kretschmann. I saw Jim this weekend, the old athletic director, football coach, another guy that just makes you feel so special. I mean, he came up to me, said, what a blessing, well, how much fun it is to watch your daughter play. She plays like you, she just gets after it. She's got passion. She gets up, those guys they were special guys at the time that just made you feel like you were, somebody way beyond what you are, so, and he still did that to me again last night. It felt like I was 20 years old and Jim Kretschmann was talking to me in his athletic director office. So just great guys.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, Schleck. And I think what people, maybe some of our listeners don't realize that after Ole was done coaching, I believe it was 1999 when he was done, and Don Meyer took the reins at the point. Ole went on to be athletic director for many years at Northern. So just the mark that he made, not only in the coaching, but also leading a department there for many years, needs to be noted there, and what he did for the Aberdeen community. And everything, in my experience with him, was just relationship based. You go to games and there he was talking to everybody. I mean, whether it was a big donor or whether it was somebody from the rural community, making relationships and just talking to everybody. My parents still say that they were season ticket holders for years, and each game Ole would make time to just come up and check in with them and say hi, and just that ability to make people feel special and make important, and how he lifted up a community and how he was there for years. He is synonymous with the Aberdeen community.
Nate, I'd like to just add on to what you said. To this date yet, every time that Coach Olson sees my parents, he's always talked with them. They are always still, to this day, 89 and 87 years old. They're asking how he's doing, of how special he made him feel. And his last year as the athletic director was like the 2012 year. He was when Sky was up there on his visit. So I would have to say this: I got to sit in naturally when Coach Olson talked to Sky, and I thought, if you aren't signing here after that, I thought, good luck to you, because I thought it was sold after Coach Olson, had talked from his athletic director position on the recruiting process.
And before we let you guys go, I want you to kind of get a close up of both of your T-shirts, because for our viewers, the podcast is available on video on YouTube and Spotify. So look at Shane's Bob Olson commemorative T-shirt. That's
a 70s Bob Olson there.
Yeah.
That's when he was still hooping.
Yeah. But I love it. It's both of you came wearing the wardrobe of the NSU Wolves, and we can't thank you both enough for your time. This is a really special episode for Nate and I, and for both of you to give us this amount of time to relive that era and the tradition of Northern State men's basketball and Bob Olson. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you too. And I just want to tell you guys are doing a great job with this. It's so good for South Dakota basketball, and enjoy following it. And then again, just to be able to talk about Northern and Coach Olson, we're blessed and thankful that you had us on.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate it. You guys aren't taking on any small feat by doing this. The preparation all the work and lining everything up while you raise your families and do your jobs. And none of this is easy to do, but what a blessing it is for you guys to take it on and tell all the great stories of South Dakota basketball. There are just so many of them. So thanks for doing it. Thanks for putting in the time, and thanks for letting us be on and talk about Coach Olson, Northern State University a bit. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much. For Schleck and I, this is special. We're talking to two of our heroes when we were kids, and you guys truly were. And the special part is knowing you back then as a kid, but being able to keep those relationships with you guys and see at events and talk to you and have that bond through all these years. And at the front of that is Bob Olson too, and having some of those commonalities too. So just a special episode. Thank you guys for everything, and thanks for taking the time today.
Shoutout.
And as we close out another episode of the State of Hoops podcast, it's time for the popular Shoutout segment. Chow, I am going to go with Sioux Valley boys basketball coach Bill Vincent. He's been on a run recently of coaches in the state who have eclipsed the coveted 500-win milestone. And Coach Vincent's done just a great job building that program at Sioux Valley. They've had many state tournament appearances. He's produced players at the college level. So Bill Vincent gets the shout out for this episode. Congrats, Coach Vincent.
Congrats, Coach Vincent. Just a mark of consistency in that Sioux Valley program. You look at the Class A rankings every year, Sioux Valley is in the discussion every year. And that's a tribute to Coach Vincent, what he has done with that program. I've had a chance to watch his teams through the years. I've always admired just that longevity of consistency, and also how his team conducts their business, their discipline. They play the game, in my opinion, the right way. They keep that tradition going, and he has been at the head of that program during that time. And also a great guy, and another one of those great mentors to many of the coaches here in South Dakota. So congrats, Coach Vincent. Awesome accomplishment.
Well, that wraps up this episode of State of Hoops podcast. Just a reminder to our listeners and viewers, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartMedia, and Amazon Music. Please also follow us on our social media platforms, YouTube, X, and Instagram. Until next time, this is your co-host Todd Schlekeway alongside my fellow co-host Nate Malchow. Have a great day.